Okay, Alan. So you talked through this several times, mentioned about owning horses, but you are no longer an owner.
No.
Um, you did sort of mention to me previously in a private correspondence, which you let me post on my website, that the reasons for it. But for anybody that hasn't read that, what are your reasons for no longer being an owner?
Well, primarily the cost return equation has got steadily worse over the last 5 years when I had horses with Michael Blake. Not Michael's fault. I mean, he's had to put his prices up because of inflation. But the prize money isn't going up, at least not for the sort of horses I was owning. Um, and then we had this premierisation thing, which made it absolutely clear, you can get more prize money if you're one of the big boys, But if you're running horses that are rated sort of 70 in the 70s, low 70s, high 60s, which is what we had, no change for you, basically. And I did add up the figures, and I don't mind quoting them. Over the 5 years, I spent 180 grand on buying horses and keeping them in training, and the return I got was 40 grand. And I couldn't sustain that any longer on what I had, the finances I had available. I couldn't justify sustaining it any longer. Um, the, 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 the reason I stopped at the time, I had a horse called Eagle Court who won here last year, yeah, but he'd been a bit injury prone after that. And I had one of those days from hell on a September Monday last year. I woke up at 7 a.m, walked down the stairs and found myself squelching across a wet carpet in the living room. My house had flooded overnight when there was torrential rain in the area, and the street drains had failed, and myself and my two neighbours had both had flood water in the house. Not too deep, not too serious, but that was 7 a.m. 9 a.m, Michael phones me up, trainer, and says, we can't run this horse in the race we were planning. He said, the vet's been here this morning. It's now a case of the kissing spines operation or a bullet. And he said, the kissing spines operation will cost you 4 grand minimum. So I said, well, I told him what happened at 7 a.m. and we agreed that he would take out, I would just let him take the horse from me, and he then took responsibility for the horse, basically. And then at 12 o'clock, I got an email from a niece of mine who lives in Scotland. Could I come up with 10 grand? They'd had some emergency roof repairs. It was quite a day.
So what you needed to do then was go back a few more winners.
Well, exactly.
So how much harder is it? Well, you say your bets haven't. The number of bets you haven't changed.
Hasn't changed, no.
So has it got harder to pick winners and get a bit of value these days, or?
No, I mean, no. I think maybe I'm making it harder for myself because I'm not keeping on top of the racing day by day. I'm not watching everything, so I'm very restricted in what I actually know going into a race. So that's just age, and I mean, so much of the racing these days is frankly a bit monotone, isn't it? You see meetings. I mean, even today, at least we've got 4 novice and maiden races today. That's a bonus. I mean, there was an Ascot card not long ago where they had 1 maiden race and 6 handicaps at Ascot, for goodness sake. And where's the novelty gone? Where's the variety gone? But no, I guess since I stopped doing online, since I stopped betting with the online firms, the numbers are going to go down because I'm going to have to be very convinced about a bet before I go and try my luck in the local shops. I think I've had 4 bets in the local shops, and I've had 1 bet where I came here for the last meeting, and I was very keen on a horse at York. I had a chat with one of the familiar faces on the rails, who said yes, he was quite happy to phone his firm's pitch at York and get me a bet of 900 to 4 on this horse. I added a couple of £100 on the tote where you're going to get at least the SP. And thankfully that one won, so I did go home from Salisbury with a profit the last time I was here. But that, unless I'm actually on the racecourse now, I'm certainly less likely to bet than I would have been a year ago. Yeah.
I mean, are you still always looking for new angles, or are you just comfortable in the way
I'm
you
pretty
bet now?
I'm pretty comfortable with what I've got now, and it's you know, I mean, the business there were two today. There, there's a hype. Oh, I've forgotten what the hype horse is now. Anyway, we'll ignore that one. There's a stats race today. The fillies handicap that comes up towards the end of the card this afternoon here. Yeah, it's for 3-year-olds and up over a mile and a quarter. There've been 18 runnings of that race. It first came onto the programme in 2005. 16 of those 18 have been won by a 3-year-old. 16 of those 18 have been won by a horse that was in the first 3 last time out. And 16 out of 18 have been won by a horse that was run within the last 5 weeks. And yet the overnight favourite at the moment is a 4-year-old. So that makes you want to get involved in the race, you know, because you've got those figures. I mean, 16 out of 18 isn't something that happens as a fluke or a coincidence. That's got to be, there's a credible reason for that. And it's not difficult to explain what it is. The 3-year-olds are still lightly raced, and therefore the handicapper hasn't got to grips with them yet, you know.
Now, you worked full-time for several years before you took the plunge to become a professional punter.
Yeah.
Is experience, well, I'm going to ask this as two, I'll put this as one question. Is experience essential to become a winning punter, or can a young person be taught enough of that experience you learned over the years in a quick enough time to bet for a living at a young age?
Well, it probably is an interesting question, really, because, I mean, I started betting in the mid-60s. I mean, I was as a teenager, and I bet cheerfully most of the way through the 70s. I was useless, utterly hopeless. I could pick winners, I could find winners at decent prices, you know, and I could draw the memory of those winners, you know. But I'd no control, no discipline, I'd no pretense of a staking plan or any thought beyond the next race, basically. I'd go racing, you know, if I went racing with friends, I'd bet on every race and have a drink between every race. You know, I mean, that was what we were there for, you know. And it was only when I got the 2-year break by going out to Kuwait and working out in Kuwait, which was from October 78 for 2 years. And that was really what brought me down to earth and cooled me down, because I couldn't bet. You know, I couldn't bet, I could only follow the race in 24 hours or 48 hours in arrears of when it had actually happened. And I sat back and had a lot of thinking time out there. You know, the working day was quite short. You know, we started work at 7 in the morning. We were finished by 1. So the afternoons were, you know, on the beach, playing cards, fishing for food. But you had thinking time as well. And I did quite a lot of thinking during that time. When I came back and I started a job in Swindon, I sort of made the decision then that I would one day try my hand at being a full-time punter. And I started to think about things more seriously and you know, work to find edges and look for ideas. And by 86 I was turning a small profit. And then I had another 6 years before I became a full-time. I mean, I got made redundant, you know, and it seemed like an omen, basically. And it was just another one of those things in my life where I've been very lucky, very fortunate. You couldn't have picked a better time to become a full-time punter than the early 90s, could you? You know, the ring was fairly vibrant still. There were people with opinions. There was no difficulty getting on. And you could still bet quite substantial sums in the shops. I mean, I look back and I think, you know, that was amazing. But, you know, I can remember one occasion, I've written the story on one of the forums. I set off for the first day of Ascot, which was always my favourite day of the meeting. And I wanted to back Balasani in the Ascot Stakes, 12-1 overnight. I'd seen it win at Warwick about 3 weeks before the Royal meeting. I thought, and it was one of those races you absolutely had to have been there and seen it to appreciate it. And I think, because very few people will have seen it. It was an evening meeting at that time. So 12-1 overnight. Martin Pipe with horse in the, you know, in the Ascot Stakes. Can't believe it. So I backed it in the morning on my Tote credit account. Set off for Ascot. Never got there because I used to stop at Wokingham station, park there and get the train. And the train I got on got as far as Bracknell and then stopped and stayed there. And I got off to answer a call of nature, and when I came back to the platform, the train had moved, but it had only gone about 100 yards down the track and stopped again. And I asked one of the staff what was going on, and I wished afterwards I hadn't asked him, because he said there had been a messy suicide at one of the unmanned level crossings between Bracknell and Ascot, and all the trains were stopped in both directions. So I got back in, I got a taxi to take me back to Wokingham station, got back home, and I went into the local Ladbroke shop, which is in a little parade of shops in a suburban area, not even in the high street or centre of town. And they were still offering 12 to 1, and they took 250 at 12 to 1 without even a murmur or a phone call. I mean, can you imagine that happening now? Utterly impossible, but you could still do those things in the early 90s, which was why it was such a perfect time to be a serious punter. So yes, going back to your point, I think, yes, experience counted. I don't think it needs to be more than, if you've made the decision and you then spend 5 or 6 years effectively practicing while you've still got a full-time job, that ought to be enough. And young people have succeeded at it. I mean, I remember, when I started, Eddie the Shoe was just starting out. Unbelievably, he's still younger than me, And I think Deaf Paul would have been about the same age as Eddie, wouldn't he?
Funnily enough, he's over there.
Yes, I knew he'd be here today. Yeah.
So a young aspiring person watching this can be taught by somebody like you, not you necessarily, but they can be taught.
I think so.
Quick
yes.
enough to then go out there and.
But of course, it's a very different world now to what it was in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, but you're still making a few quid now. So,
yeah.
So
it's not impossible. I'm sure it's not impossible.
But one of the things that we see online a lot is young lads with wedges of cash marching up, chest out, having thousands on course because they wouldn't get it anywhere else, on odds-on shots, or short price favourites. Now, is that ever a long-term successful strategy?
Well, I've never thought so. No, because you just need such an enormously high strike rate. I can remember writing somewhere, I don't remember if it was a book or an article, about, watching, as you say, young lads who've backed a winner at 11 to 10 or even money, and are clearly incapable of working out that all they've acquired is the losing stake for the next race.
Now, has there ever been anyone whose opinion you respected so much that if they said, Alan, you want to be on this one today, you would just, without thinking about it, blindly and obediently have your monkey on?
Well, if we're talking to other punters, no.
Well, no, to anybody. Anyone.
Okay, there was one person, and this is, I'm probably revealing a secret here, but I used to do the Cheltenham preview evening for my friend Roger Hart, which was in the Ligon Arms in Chipping Camden, and it was usually on the Sunday night, or even earlier on, it was on the Monday night. So we knew what was going to run. And it was great fun. You had the Duke and David Nicholson and Jim Old, somebody from one of the bookies firms or one of the spread firms. It was usually Ian Carnaby in the chair, and me as the loudmouth, I'd be a trainer and a jockey. It was often Dickie Johnson, Alan King, that sort of thing. Anyway, the Duke was a laugh because during the time when Barracuda was big in the Stayers Hurdle at the early part of this century, he would refer to Francois and Thierry Dumas as Frog 1 and Frog 2. Imagine the uproar.
Different times, everybody different
Exactly,
times.
imagine the uproar on social media if you tried that now. But, I never thought then that you could make a living backing favourites. And if they came up with a favourite, if all the other pundits on the panel were piling on the short price favourite, I just thoroughly enjoyed taking the mickey out of them and saying, you're never going to make any decent living out of that way. I said, the only person here who's grinning about this information that you're advising everybody to back the favourite is the bookmaker, because he loves it, he's happy. There was a famous one, how long have I got?
Keep going.
There's a famous one was Big Bucks in the World Hurdle 2009, because all the other punditry were going for Casbar Bliss. And I completely mocked the idea that Casbar Bliss was going to win the Stayers Hurdle, having already been beaten in it twice. Nobody's ever won it after losing in it twice, ever. So, and I was a huge fan of Big Bucks. I seen him win his first hurdle in that sequence at January on New Year's Day at Cheltenham, and it immediately struck me that he was perfectly suited for the new course at Cheltenham, where they have that very long run from 2 out to the last hurdle, because he was never a great jumper, but by God, he had some sort of engine, didn't he? Some sort of motor. You know, and I basically said to the audience, 100 or so people in that little room, don't have a bet on Tuesday, don't have a bet on Wednesday, don't have a bet in the first 3 races on Thursday, and all the money you've saved up, put it on big bucks in race 4 on the Thursday.